The journey begins long before anyone speaks of battles. It begins with the slow climb into the mountains of northeastern Korea, where every mile seems to carry you farther from the familiar world. You sit in the back of a 2.5-ton cargo truck, shoulder to shoulder with fellow Marines, wrapped in heavy parkas that already feel inadequate against the sharp November wind. The canvas covering above your head snaps rhythmically as the vehicle crawls along the narrow mountain road, while the steady rumble of the diesel engine becomes the soundtrack of another long day. It is late November 1950. Only a few months earlier, the Korean War had begun when North Korean forces crossed the 38th parallel. The successful landing at Incheon had dramatically changed the course of the war, allowing United Nations forces to push north toward the Yalu River. Many believed the conflict was nearing its end. Around campfires and inside command tents, there were quiet conversations about being home by Christmas. Yet the mountains ahead offer no such promise. The road twists between steep ridges covered with bare trees whose branches reach into a pale grey sky. Fresh snow blankets the hillsides, hiding rocks and frozen streams beneath a calm, white surface. The beauty of the landscape is undeniable, but so is its silence. There are no busy roads, no villages filled with activity, only distant peaks disappearing into thin clouds and the occasional column of smoke rising from isolated Korean homes tucked deep within the valleys. As the truck climbs higher, the temperature falls with surprising speed. Your breath forms thick clouds that freeze almost as quickly as they appear. Frost begins creeping across the inside of the canvas cover, forming delicate patterns that resemble tiny branches. Leather gloves stiffen, metal buckles burn against bare fingers. Even blinking feels different as the cold air dries your eyes. The Marines around you speak little. Some conserve their energy. Others quietly adjust their packs or inspect the straps securing their rifles. One Marine removes a small notebook from his pocket, scribbling a few lines before carefully returning it beneath his jacket where the ink is less likely to freeze. Many soldiers kept journals during the Korean War, recording not grand victories, but ordinary observations, the cold coffee, aching feet, broken equipment, and endless waiting that filled most of their days. The truck finally slows as another convoy blocks the narrow road ahead. No one complains. Waiting is simply another duty. Drivers leave their engines running whenever possible. Experienced mechanics have warned that shutting an engine down in this cold could make restarting it nearly impossible. Thick engine oil moves sluggishly, while batteries lose much of their power in sub-zero temperatures. Every vehicle must be checked repeatedly. Radiators, fuel lines, brakes, and tire chains all require constant attention. An army moves only as fast as its machines can survive the weather. These quiet maintenance routines rarely appear in history books, yet they determine whether supplies reach the front or remain stranded miles away. The convoy begins moving again just before midday. As you continue toward Yudam-ni, you notice small details that would have escaped attention in warmer weather. The wooden stocks of rifles feel colder than steel. Water canteens begin forming thin layers of ice despite being tucked inside heavy clothing. A simple task like tightening a strap becomes difficult while wearing thick gloves, yet removing them risks numb fingers within minutes. The cold governs every decision. Military manuals issued before the campaign advised soldiers to inspect one another constantly for signs of frostbite. White patches of skin, especially around the nose, cheeks, and ears, could appear without warning. A Marine might not even realize his face was freezing until a friend quietly pointed it out. "Rub your cheek," someone says softly to the man beside you. He nods and does exactly that. Such small reminders become acts of protection. By late afternoon, the convoy reaches the outskirts of Yudam-ni, a modest farming village surrounded by rugged mountains. Stone walls divide frozen fields where little remains of the autumn harvest. Low houses with thatched roofs sit quietly beneath fresh snow, while thin trails of smoke drift from chimneys into the still air. Some local Korean families continue their daily routines despite the growing presence of military vehicles and unfamiliar uniforms. Orders are given calmly. Unload equipment, establish defensive positions, prepare for nightfall. The work begins immediately. Packs are lowered from trucks. Ammunition crates are stacked carefully. Radios are assembled and tested. Engineers examine nearby roads, while officers study surrounding ridgelines through binoculars. Every hill overlooking the valley is noted. Every possible approach is discussed. Then comes the task few men enjoy. Digging. The frozen earth is as hard as stone. Entrenching tools strike the ground with dull metallic sounds that echo through the quiet valley. Progress is painfully slow. Often only a few inches of frozen soil can be broken before another Marine takes over. The labor warms the body briefly, but the moment you stop swinging the shovel, the cold returns with renewed force. Nearby, field kitchens begin preparing the evening meal. Steam rises from large insulated containers carrying hot coffee and simple rations. Marines gather patiently with metal mess tins in their hands. Nobody lingers after eating. Food cools within minutes, and darkness arrives quickly behind the mountains. As evening settles across Yudam-ni, generators hum softly near the command post. Radio operators adjust heavy headphones while static crackles through the airwaves. Mechanics crawl beneath trucks with flashlights, checking fuel lines before temperatures fall even lower overnight. Corpsmen inspect blistered feet and stiff fingers, treating small problems before they become serious injuries. These quiet routines repeat hour after hour, not because they are exciting, but because they keep an army alive. Far beyond the ridges surrounding the village, thousands of soldiers from the Chinese People's Volunteer Army are already moving through the mountains under cover of darkness. Few Marines in Yudam-ni fully understand the scale of what is approaching. The valley feels peaceful, almost motionless beneath the first stars of the night. You stand for a moment outside your newly dug foxhole. The wind carries only the distant sound of an idling engine and the faint clink of tools being packed away for the evening. Above you, the winter sky stretches endlessly across Korea, brilliant with stars untouched by city lights. It is difficult to imagine that such overwhelming silence can exist on the edge of one of the most demanding battles of the Korean War. And as you settle into the frozen ground for your first night at Yudam-ni, one quiet thought lingers longer than the cold itself. Can any soldier ever truly prepare for an enemy that arrives not only from the mountains, but from the winter itself? Morning arrives quietly over Yudam-ni, though the word morning feels almost misleading. The sun rises above the surrounding mountains, yet it offers little warmth. Its pale light simply reveals a landscape that has become even whiter overnight. Snow rests on the roofs of village houses, on abandoned stone walls, and across the narrow trails winding between marine positions. The valley is beautiful in a way that seems almost detached from the hardship unfolding within it. You emerge from your foxhole carefully, your boots stiff after a night spent in temperatures far below freezing. Every movement feels deliberate. Before anything else, you stamp your feet to restore circulation, flex your fingers inside heavy gloves, and brush away the thin layer of snow that settled on your helmet while you slept. Around you, dozens of Marines are already awake. There is no shouting or frantic movement. Instead, the camp stirs with quiet purpose. A field stove crackles somewhere nearby. A mechanic taps gently on the side of a truck engine before lifting its hood. Radio operators check antennas coated in frost. A corpsman moves from one position to another, asking each Marine the same simple questions. How are your hands? Any numbness? Show me your feet if you've got concerns. These questions are routine now. During the Chosin campaign, frostbite threatened nearly everyone. In many cases, it proved as dangerous to a soldier's ability to fight as enemy action. A pair of damp socks, ignored for too long, could end a Marine's place on the line. Officers reminded their men that surviving the cold depended not only on courage, but also on discipline. Breakfast is simple. Hot coffee, powdered eggs when available, K-rations carried from supply trucks. The coffee disappears quickly, not because of hunger, but because warmth has become its own necessity. Metal cups cool within moments. Some Marines keep their gloves on while drinking, unwilling to expose bare skin to the biting air any longer than necessary. After breakfast, work begins again. Your foxhole, dug hastily the evening before, must be improved. The frozen ground made deep digging nearly impossible, so sandbags, timber, and stones are added wherever they can provide extra protection. Picks strike the earth with slow, measured blows. The sound echoes softly across the valley like distant hammering from an unseen workshop. Every improvement is small. A stronger wall, a better firing position, a little more shelter from the wind. Military life often depends on these ordinary tasks. A well-built foxhole drains water more effectively when snow begins to melt. A properly placed sandbag may stop fragments that would otherwise travel farther. None of the work feels dramatic, yet every hour spent preparing quietly increases the chances of survival. Nearby, another team is occupied with the trucks that carried supplies into the valley. Cold weather is relentless on machinery. Drivers are instructed to start engines periodically throughout the day, even when the vehicles are not moving. Thick lubricants slow the motion of internal parts, batteries weaken, fuel lines can freeze. Mechanics crawl beneath vehicles on blankets laid across the snow, their gloved hands blackened with grease despite the freezing temperatures. One Marine jokes that the trucks demand almost as much attention as the men. The others smile briefly. It is the sort of humor that survives even in difficult places. Weapons receive the same careful attention. Every rifle is cleaned again. Not because it has been fired extensively, but because moisture from breath, snow, or simple handling can freeze inside the action. Ordinary gun oil, useful in warmer climates, becomes sticky in extreme cold. Marines are instructed to remove excess lubricant, leaving only the thinnest protective layer. It is meticulous work, repeated day after day, because reliability cannot be left to chance. The hours pass slowly. There is time to notice details. The faint smell of diesel drifting through the crisp air. The steady rhythm of shovels striking frozen soil. The distant cry of a crow crossing the valley alone. Even the wind seems to have its own voice as it slips through bare branches and over snow-covered ridges. From higher ground, sentries scan the surrounding hills through binoculars. The mountains appear peaceful, yet everyone understands that appearances can be deceptive. Reports arrive by radio describing scattered contacts elsewhere, though little is visible from Yudam-ni itself. The waiting continues. Waiting is one of the least discussed realities of military history. Battles may last hours, but preparation, maintenance, and observation consume far more time. Soldiers learn patience not because they enjoy it, but because history often demands it. As afternoon fades, supply details begin organizing equipment for another cold night. Water containers are checked constantly because they freeze with surprising speed. Ammunition boxes are covered against drifting snow. Spare clothing is distributed where available, though shortages remain common. Socks become valuable items. Dry gloves are treasured. A simple wool blanket can feel more important than almost any other possession. The sun disappears behind the mountains earlier than expected. Almost immediately, the temperature begins falling once again. A soft orange glow appears inside a few sheltered cooking areas where evening meals are prepared. Steam rises into the darkening sky before vanishing into the icy air. Marines gather quietly, speaking in low voices about home, about families they have not seen for months, and about the approaching winter that seems determined to grow colder with each passing day. Far beyond the valley, unseen by most of the men settling into their evening routines, large formations of Chinese soldiers continue moving silently through the mountains. They travel mainly at night, using narrow trails hidden among the ridges, carrying little more than rifles, ammunition, and determination. Inside Yudam-ni, however, the evening remains strangely calm. Generators continue their steady hum. A mechanic tightens the final bolt on a truck before closing the hood. A radio operator writes another entry in the communications log. One by one, Marines return to their foxholes as darkness blankets the valley. You settle back beneath your heavy parka, listening to the quiet rhythm of an engine idling somewhere beyond the snow. The camp feels prepared. Yet deep in the surrounding mountains, winter and history are still moving closer with every passing hour. And as sleep slowly overtakes the valley, another quiet question drifts through the frozen night. How long can careful preparation hold back forces that neither men nor machines can fully control? Night settles over Yudam-ni with remarkable speed. One moment the last traces of daylight cling to the mountain peaks, and the next the valley is wrapped in a darkness so complete that even familiar landmarks seem to disappear. Above you, the winter sky stretches from ridge to ridge, filled with countless stars that shine with unusual clarity in the bitterly cold air. You pull your sleeping bag tighter inside the foxhole, though sleep is an ambitious word. Marines rarely spend an entire night resting, watches must be kept, equipment must be checked, the cold itself refuses to let the body relax for long. The thermometer continues its slow descent. By midnight, temperatures have dropped far below freezing. Every breath leaves a cloud that hangs briefly before vanishing into the darkness. Moisture from your breath settles on the collar of your parka, turning into tiny crystals of ice. Even the canvas covers stretched over supply stacks become stiff as wood. Somewhere nearby, an engine continues to idle. The low, steady rhythm is almost comforting. Drivers have been instructed to keep certain vehicles running through the night whenever fuel allows. Restarting a frozen engine tomorrow morning could take precious hours, or prove impossible altogether. Fuel consumption is carefully recorded. Mechanics make quiet rounds with flashlights, checking gauges, listening for unusual sounds, tightening loose fittings with gloved hands that have long since stopped feeling warm. Few people imagine mechanics when they picture famous battles, yet without them, armies simply stop moving. Near the command post, radio operators remain awake beneath dim lights shielded from the surrounding hills. Messages arrive in short bursts of static. Weather reports, supply updates, position reports from neighboring units. Each message is copied neatly into logbooks before being passed along to officers studying maps spread across folding tables. Military history often remembers the commanders. It is easy to forget the young operator who spent 12 hours listening through headphones, making certain that every message reached its destination. You begin your turn on sentry duty. The snow crunches softly beneath your boots as you move toward the edge of the perimeter. Another Marine quietly hands over responsibility before disappearing toward his own foxhole for a few hours of precious rest. The valley is almost silent. Wind drifts gently through leafless trees. A distant dog barks somewhere in the darkness. Nothing else disturbs the night. You scan the ridgelines again and again, allowing your eyes to adjust to the moonlight reflecting from the snow. Shapes appear and disappear among the rocks. A fallen tree briefly resembles a man standing motionless before revealing its true form. Fatigue has a way of playing small tricks on the mind. To stay alert, you shift your weight from one foot to the other. Standing completely still invites the cold to settle into your boots. Marines have learned to flex their fingers inside thick gloves, to roll their shoulders gently beneath heavy parkas, and to avoid unnecessary movement while never allowing the body to become motionless. These small habits are not written dramatically into history books, but they help men survive the night. Back in the camp, corpsmen make one final inspection before trying to rest themselves. They examine pale cheeks for signs of frostbite. They remind exhausted Marines to change damp socks if they have dry ones available. Medical supplies are carefully organized so that even in darkness, every bandage and bottle can be found without delay. The simplest routines become acts of preservation. Around one small cooking area, a handful of Marines quietly heat water for coffee. Conversation remains subdued. Someone speaks about home in Iowa. Another remembers fishing trips in Oregon. A third wonders aloud whether the snow back home is falling just as heavily this year. No one talks for long. The cold encourages silence. Even words seem to freeze before traveling very far. Hours pass. The bulkhead clock inside headquarters ticks steadily onward. A clerk continues updating supply records by the light of a shaded lantern. Ammunition counts, fuel reserves, medical inventories, food remaining for the coming days. Wars depend as much upon paperwork as courage. Every crate unloaded, every gallon of fuel consumed, every blanket issued. Someone must count them all. Outside the village, the surrounding mountains remain hidden beneath darkness. Unknown to most of the Marines resting below, thousands of soldiers from the Chinese People's Volunteer Army continue their careful approach through narrow valleys and steep mountain trails. Moving mostly at night, they avoid roads whenever possible, carrying limited equipment but remarkable endurance. The distance between the two armies grows smaller with every passing hour. Yet inside Yudam-ni, the night still feels almost peaceful. The generator hums, the trucks idle, the wind whispers across frozen fields. Near dawn, the eastern horizon begins to soften with the faintest trace of grey. The stars slowly fade one by one, though the air grows even colder just before sunrise. Frost now coats nearly every exposed surface. Helmets shimmer white. Rifle slings have become stiff with ice. The valley seems frozen in time. You take one last slow look across the snow-covered landscape. In years to come, historians will remember this campaign for its extraordinary hardship, its tactical withdrawal, and the resilience of the men who endured conditions few armies had ever experienced. But standing here now, none of that history has been written yet. There is only another morning to face, another rifle to inspect, another cup of hot coffee to hope for, another shift to stand. The extraordinary is still hidden inside the ordinary. As the first light of dawn spreads quietly across Yudam-ni, you realize that survival in these mountains will depend not upon a single heroic moment, but upon countless ordinary decisions made correctly, day after day, despite exhaustion and relentless cold. The Battle of the Chosin Reservoir would eventually become one of the defining chapters of the Korean War. The men who endured it carried home memories not only of combat, but of frozen boots, silent nights, idling engines, shared coffee, careful maintenance, and the quiet determination to keep moving when winter itself seemed determined to stop them. History often celebrates victories and defeats. Yet sometimes its greatest lessons are found in the patience of ordinary people who simply refuse to surrender to the elements. And as the sun finally rises over the frozen mountains, illuminating a valley that still appears calm before the storm, one final thought remains with you. How many moments of quiet endurance are forever lost between the famous pages of history? And how many ordinary lives quietly shaped the course of the world without ever knowing it? Not every Marine at the Chosin Reservoir spent the night marching through snow or firing a rifle. Many spent it doing something far quieter, standing perfectly still. You climb out of your foxhole just before sunset as another Marine quietly finishes his shift. There are no dramatic words exchanged. He simply nods, stamps the snow from his boots, and whispers the same advice that has been passed from one sentry to another for days. Keep moving your fingers. It sounds almost too simple to matter. But here, in late November 1950, where temperatures are falling toward minus 30 degrees Celsius, minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, that advice may prove more valuable than any speech from a commanding officer. Your assigned position overlooks a narrow valley leading toward Yudam-ni. During daylight, it appears almost peaceful. Low stone walls divide frozen fields. Bare trees stand motionless along the hillsides. Thin trails disappear into the mountains where the snow has already hidden most signs of travel. As darkness approaches, the landscape changes. Distances become impossible to judge. Every shadow seems alive. Every rock resembles a crouching figure until the moonlight reveals otherwise. The greatest challenge is not fear, it is remaining alert. Hours pass slowly on sentry duty. Unlike the moments remembered in battle reports, nothing appears to happen. Yet those quiet hours are essential. Entire units depend upon the watchfulness of a handful of exhausted soldiers standing alone in the cold. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, not because you are impatient, because remaining completely still allows the cold to creep steadily through your boots. The thick leather has already stiffened. Layers of wool socks provide some protection, but moisture is the enemy. Sweat from a long march earlier in the day now begins to cool, making your feet feel heavier with each passing hour. Medical officers repeatedly warn Marines about frostbite. Numbness is dangerous. Pain is actually reassuring because it means circulation still exists. Once feeling disappears entirely, serious injury may already have begun, so every few minutes you wiggle your toes inside your boots. You clench and unclench your fingers around the wooden stock of your rifle. You roll your shoulders beneath the heavy parka, careful not to make movements large enough to draw attention beyond the perimeter. These tiny exercises become part of the rhythm of the night. Nearby, another sentry coughs once before silence returns. Farther behind the lines, the steady rumble of diesel engines drifts through the valley. Several trucks remain running despite the precious fuel they consume. Mechanics know that shutting them down could mean spending hours the next morning trying to thaw frozen engines. The war continues even while everyone appears to be standing still. Inside maintenance areas, men work beneath hooded flashlights. A wrench turns slowly. A battery is checked. Fuel filters are inspected for ice. Someone records engine hours inside a weather-stained notebook. None of these tasks will earn medals, yet every one of them helps keep the division alive. You glance toward the command post where a faint glow escapes from beneath canvas walls. Inside, officers examine maps while radio operators copy reports arriving from neighboring positions. Static fills the room almost continuously. Sometimes messages are clear. Sometimes only fragments survive the interference created by mountains and weather. Communication is never guaranteed. The cold affects everything. Pencils snap more easily. Ink thickens. Metal becomes painful to touch with bare skin. Even opening a ration tin requires patience because stiff fingers refuse to cooperate. Around midnight, the wind begins to strengthen. It sweeps loose snow across the frozen ground, erasing footprints made only hours earlier. The sound is surprisingly gentle, more like sand sliding across stone than a winter storm. Visibility shrinks as tiny crystals drift through the moonlight. You raise your rifle slightly and continue scanning the ridgeline. Training reminds you to search slowly, left to right, pause, then back again. The human eye notices movement more easily than shapes, especially at night. Several times you stop, convinced you have seen something. A branch sways, snow slips from a rock. Nothing more. Fatigue encourages imagination. Experienced Marines know this. That is why watches are rotated throughout the night. No one remains on duty long enough for exhaustion to become overwhelming. Fresh eyes are often the best defense. Somewhere beyond the mountains, thousands of soldiers from the Chinese People's Volunteer Army continue moving through the darkness. Many travel without vehicles, carrying supplies on their backs, following narrow mountain paths invisible to aircraft during daylight. Neither army enjoys the weather. Both endure it. Both understand that winter has become an opponent no commander can negotiate with. Your thoughts briefly wander home. You imagine a warm kitchen, the sound of rain instead of frozen wind, the smell of fresh bread replacing diesel fuel and gun oil. Then you bring your attention back to the valley. A sentry cannot afford to dream for long. The first responsibility is always the men sleeping behind you. As the night slowly approaches its coldest hours, the stars above Korea burn with extraordinary brightness. There is almost no artificial light to compete with them. The sky appears endless, stretching over mountains that have witnessed countless winters long before armies arrived. You take another slow breath. The air is so cold it almost seems dry enough to crack. Everything remains quiet, perhaps too quiet. And as another hour slips by beneath the frozen stars, you begin to wonder whether silence itself can become the heaviest burden a soldier is asked to carry. The night deepens, though time feels strangely suspended. Hours pass without a sunrise, without conversation, and without any obvious sign that the world beyond your position is still moving. The only reliable measure of time is the watch fastened beneath the sleeve of your parka. You lift it carefully, shielding its face from the wind with your glove. Just after 1 o'clock in the morning. Only 1 hour. It feels like 4. Military life is often remembered through battles and victories, yet countless nights are spent exactly like this, waiting, watching, and listening. At the Chosin Reservoir, these quiet hours became just as demanding as the moments of combat. A sentry who lost concentration for only a few minutes might miss movement on a distant ridge, while a sentry who became careless with the cold could lose the use of his hands before dawn. You continue scanning the valley. Left, center, right, pause, repeat. The routine has become almost instinctive. The mountains offer little movement. Moonlight reflects from the snow, creating strange illusions. Shadows lengthen as clouds drift slowly overhead. A broken fence post resembles a soldier standing motionless. A cluster of frozen bushes briefly appears to be a patrol moving through the valley before your eyes adjust once more. Veteran Marines learn never to trust a first impression at night. Patience is often more valuable than speed. Behind your position, life inside the perimeter continues with quiet efficiency. The field telephone line is inspected again. Earlier in the evening, engineers noticed that the cable had become stiff from the cold. If ice damaged the insulation, communication between defensive positions could be interrupted at the worst possible moment. Two Marines walked slowly along the line with flashlights fitted with blue filters, stopping every few yards to examine the wire before brushing away fresh snow. Nearby, another group works around a stack of ammunition crates. The wooden boxes are carefully covered with canvas to keep drifting snow from freezing around the lids. It is slow, repetitive work, yet every crate must remain accessible. Frozen hinges or swollen wood could waste precious minutes if ammunition needed to be distributed quickly. Such details rarely appear in battlefield paintings, but they mattered every single night. A few hundred yards away, the camp's mechanics remain awake. One truck has developed a small fuel leak. In warmer weather, it might have been repaired after sunrise. Here, waiting is too dangerous. The mechanic slides beneath the vehicle, lying on a canvas sheet spread across the frozen ground. A flashlight hangs from a hook beneath the engine compartment, while another Marine passes tools one at a time. Metal wrenches bite against bare bolts. Every touch sends a sharp sting through thick gloves. When the repair is finally complete, the engine is started once more. Its familiar diesel rhythm echoes gently across the sleeping camp. For many Marines, that sound becomes reassuring. As long as the engines continue running, supplies can continue moving. You notice another sentry several positions away. Neither of you speaks. Instead, he raises one gloved hand briefly. You return the gesture. No words are needed. Both of you understand exactly what the other is experiencing. Cold has a curious way of creating quiet friendships. The wind begins to shift. It now blows directly down the valley, carrying tiny grains of snow that strike your face like fine sand. You tighten the collar of your parka another inch. Frost has gathered around the edges of your helmet. Even your rifle sling has become stiff enough to hold its shape. Corpsmen make another round through the foxholes. Rather than asking how everyone feels, they look carefully at faces illuminated by dim red flashlights. Cheeks, noses, ears. Frostbite often appears before the person affected realizes anything is wrong. One Marine is quietly told to warm his hands beneath his armpits for several minutes before returning to duty. Another changes into a dry pair of socks taken from his pack. No one complains. Everyone understands that these small precautions may prevent permanent injury. Inside the command post, officers study updated intelligence reports. Radio traffic has increased slightly. Scattered observations from neighboring Marine positions suggest unusual movement somewhere beyond the surrounding ridges. Nothing definitive, nothing alarming, simply enough information to encourage greater vigilance. The perimeter remains calm, yet watches are checked again. Machine gun positions are quietly inspected. Extra ammunition is placed where it can be reached easily in darkness. No loud orders are given. Preparedness arrives through routine rather than panic. Beyond the mountains, unseen by those inside the perimeter, columns of Chinese soldiers continue advancing through narrow valleys. Many carry little more than rifles, grenades, blankets, and bags of rice. Their own hardships are immense. They march through the same brutal cold, often with minimal winter clothing, relying on discipline, endurance, and careful movement through terrain hidden from the roads below. The frozen landscape challenges every army equally. Neither side escapes winter. As the hours move toward dawn, fatigue settles more heavily upon the camp. Someone quietly pours another cup of coffee from an insulated container. The liquid has already begun cooling. A clerk inside headquarters rubs warmth back into his fingers before continuing to write inventory figures into a logbook. A radio operator stretches his shoulders after hours spent wearing heavy headphones. These are not scenes of glory, they are scenes of persistence. History often depends upon people who simply continue doing ordinary work while extraordinary events slowly gather around them. You return your attention to the valley once again. Nothing moves. The snow remains untouched. The mountains remain silent. Yet experience has taught you that silence is not always empty. Sometimes it is merely waiting. And as the eastern horizon begins to hint at another frozen morning, one quiet thought lingers in your mind. How many of history's greatest turning points first announced themselves not with noise, but with a silence so complete that almost no one recognized its meaning? The darkest hours of the night eventually begin to loosen their grip. There is no sudden sunrise in the mountains of northeastern Korea. Instead, darkness fades almost reluctantly. The stars disappear one by one, and the sharp outlines of distant ridges slowly emerge from the black horizon. Snow-covered hills that had seemed endless during the night now return to view, quiet and motionless beneath a pale winter sky. You are still standing at your post. The watch has lasted only a few hours, but it feels much longer. Your boots are stiff. Your shoulders ache from carrying the same position through the cold. The rifle in your hands feels heavier now than it did at sunset, not because its weight has changed, but because fatigue quietly settles into every muscle. A Marine approaches through the snow. He is your relief. There are no formal speeches or dramatic handovers. He simply steps beside you, whispers a few observations about the valley, and asks the question every sentry has asked before ending a shift. Anything unusual? You think for a moment. The wind picked up. A few shadows. No movement. He nods. That is enough. The watch changes quietly, just as it has countless times before. As you walk back toward the camp, you notice how much work has already begun. Long before breakfast, mechanics are once again gathered around the transport trucks. Throughout the night, engines were kept idling whenever possible, but every vehicle still requires inspection before another day begins. One Marine wipes frost from the windshield with a cloth. Another checks the tire chains wrapped around heavy wheels. A third crawls beneath the engine compartment, searching for leaks that may have appeared during the night. The routine repeats every morning. Fuel, oil, coolant, battery, brakes. Without these inspections, the convoy that supplies the division could fail before leaving the valley. Nearby, cooks prepare breakfast over field stoves sheltered from the wind. The smell of coffee drifts slowly through the camp, drawing tired Marines from their foxholes. Steam rises from metal containers before vanishing into the freezing air. Breakfast is simple: powdered eggs, K-rations, coffee. No one complains. A hot drink is enough to lift spirits, if only for a few minutes. Some Marines warm their hands around the cups before taking the first sip. Others use the brief meal to write in small notebooks carried inside waterproof covers. Many diaries from the Korean War speak less about combat than about weather. Another freezing night. Couldn't feel my toes. Coffee froze before we finished it. These ordinary observations appear again and again in personal journals, reminding us that daily survival occupied the thoughts of soldiers as much as the fighting itself. After breakfast, the camp returns to its familiar rhythm. Weapons are cleaned once more. Snow is cleared from communication trenches. Machine gun crews inspect ammunition belts for moisture. Signal personnel test radios whose batteries have weakened overnight. Everything follows a routine refined by experience. History often remembers battles as moments of chaos. Military life, however, depends upon order. Each Marine knows his responsibilities. Each team completes its own tasks. No one waits to be reminded. The discipline developed during training now reveals its true purpose. An organized camp survives hardships more effectively than a disorganized one. Later in the morning, an officer walks slowly along the defensive positions, speaking quietly with the men. He asks about frozen boots, about sleeping conditions, about equipment problems. Leadership during the Chosin campaign often involved listening as much as commanding. Officers understood that exhaustion, hunger, and extreme cold could slowly wear down even experienced Marines if small problems were ignored. Far beyond the perimeter, patrols continue observing the surrounding mountains. Reports remain uncertain. Tracks have been found in fresh snow. distant movement has been reported during the night. No one knows exactly what lies beyond the ridgelines. The uncertainty becomes part of everyday life. Back inside the camp, a corpsman carefully wraps fresh bandages around a Marine's frostbitten fingers. The injury is minor, caught early because another Marine noticed pale skin before serious damage occurred. Such moments rarely attract attention, yet they reveal something important. Survival at Chosin was never achieved alone. Men watched one another constantly. They reminded each other to eat, to change socks, to keep moving, to stay awake. Small acts of care quietly held the division together. As afternoon approaches, sunlight reflects brilliantly from the snow, making many Marines narrow their eyes against the glare. Despite the brightness, warmth never arrives. The temperature remains well below freezing. The mountains appear peaceful, almost inviting. Only those living among them understand how demanding they truly are. Looking back across the valley, you realize that your memories of the previous night are already becoming strangely blurred. You remember the sound of the wind, the steady engine, the frozen stars, the silence. These ordinary details seem far more vivid than the passing hours themselves. Perhaps that is how memory often works. It preserves feelings more carefully than clocks. Historians would later describe the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir through maps, casualty figures, and strategic decisions. Those facts remain essential. They explain what happened and why it mattered. But they cannot fully capture the experience of standing alone on a frozen hillside, listening to a silent valley while hoping the truck behind you would still start in the morning, or quietly checking the face of the Marine beside you for signs of frostbite before returning to your own position. Those moments never changed the headlines, yet together, they made survival possible. When veterans of Chosin spoke years later, many remembered the cold before they remembered anything else. Not because winter won, but because it demanded something from every person who endured it: patience, discipline, endurance, and above all, quiet determination. As another evening slowly approaches and fresh watch schedules are posted around the camp, you take one final look toward the mountains. They remain silent. They reveal nothing. Yet somewhere beyond those frozen ridges, history continues moving one careful step at a time. And perhaps the greatest lesson left behind by the sentries of Chosin is this: the fate of an army is not shaped only by the generals who make decisions or the battles that fill history books. Sometimes it is shaped by an ordinary soldier who stays awake through one more freezing night, faithfully watching over the men sleeping behind him. Long before a Marine opened a ration tin or a corpsman reached for fresh bandages, someone had to bring those supplies through the mountains. That responsibility belongs to you. The morning begins well before sunrise. A small lantern burns inside a canvas operations tent where convoy schedules have already been written by hand. Drivers gather around a folding table, holding enamel mugs filled with hot coffee that sends thin streams of steam into the icy air. Nobody drinks quickly. The warmth lasts only a few moments, and everyone has learned to appreciate every second. Outside, rows of military trucks sit beneath a fresh layer of snow. They appear motionless, silent, but within the next hour, each one must be awakened. You walk toward your vehicle, an M35 cargo truck, its olive-drab body almost white beneath the frost. The windshield is coated in a sheet of ice thick enough to blur everything beyond it. Before the engine can even be started, the truck itself demands attention. You scrape the glass, check the tires, inspect the chains wrapped tightly around each wheel. Then you lift the hood. Cold weather changes everything about mechanical work. Engine oil thickens overnight, batteries lose strength, and rubber hoses become stiff and brittle. Mechanics move slowly between vehicles carrying toolboxes that have become almost as heavy as the trucks themselves. Every engine is inspected before the convoy is allowed to move. One mechanic smiles tiredly. "If she starts first try," he says, "buy yourself a lottery ticket when you get home." A few Marines laugh, not because the joke is especially funny, because everyone understands how unlikely it is. You climb into the driver's seat and pull the choke. The starter groans. Nothing. You try again. The engine coughs once before falling silent. Nearby, another truck finally roars to life, sending a thick cloud of grey diesel smoke into the frozen morning air. One by one, other engines begin joining the chorus until the entire motor pool is filled with the steady rhythm of idling machinery. At last, your engine catches. The vibration travels through the steering wheel and into your hands. It is a comforting feeling. A running engine means one more truck is ready. The cargo waiting behind you is hardly glamorous. Wooden crates of rifle ammunition, boxes of K-rations, medical dressings, replacement radio batteries, diesel fuel packed inside heavy drums. Each item has been counted, recorded, and loaded with care. To someone reading an inventory sheet months later, they are merely numbers. To the Marines waiting at Yudam-ni, they mean another day of survival. The convoy commander gathers the drivers for a final briefing. The route is familiar. From Hagaru-ri north toward the forward positions. Distance is measured not only in miles, but in road conditions. The mountains decide how quickly anyone travels here. Snow hides potholes. Ice forms beneath bridges. Sharp bends leave little room for error. One mistake can block the entire convoy. The trucks pull away slowly. No one exceeds a cautious speed. The lead vehicle sets the pace, while each driver keeps careful distance from the truck ahead. Too close, and a sudden stop could cause a collision on the ice. Too far, and the convoy becomes vulnerable. Discipline keeps everyone moving together. The road winds upward through valleys carved between steep ridges. In places it narrows so dramatically that two large trucks could never pass side by side. Drivers grip their steering wheels firmly, making small corrections as chains bite into frozen earth beneath the tires. Every turn requires concentration. There are no guardrails, only steep drops disappearing into snow-covered ravines. Occasionally the convoy halts, not because of enemy fire, because another vehicle needs attention. A mechanic kneels beside a frozen brake line. Another tightens loose tire chains. Someone checks a leaking radiator hose before it becomes a much larger problem. Nobody complains about the delay. Every driver understands that helping one truck means protecting the entire convoy. As the morning continues, the mountains grow quieter. The engines become the loudest sound in the valley. Their steady rumble echoes from ridge to ridge before fading into the distance. It is almost hypnotic. You begin recognizing familiar landmarks. A stone bridge crossing a frozen stream, a cluster of abandoned farmhouses, a hillside where snow has drifted deep enough to hide the road's edge. Each landmark quietly measures progress toward the Marines waiting ahead. Supply convoys rarely appear in wartime photographs. Cameras naturally focus on dramatic moments. Yet without these slow columns of trucks, no frontline position could survive for long. Every meal, every bandage, every gallon of fuel, every letter from home, all travel along roads like this one. The convoy continues climbing into the mountains, disappearing deeper into a landscape ruled not by armies, but by winter itself. And as another bend reveals yet another stretch of frozen road disappearing into the white distance, one quiet thought settles into your mind. Can an army truly outrun the cold when every mile forward demands even more from the people keeping it alive? By mid-morning, the convoy has settled into its rhythm. The trucks move in single file, their engines producing a deep, steady hum that echoes through the narrow valleys. Snow falls lightly now, not enough to stop the convoy, but enough to soften the outlines of the road ahead. The mountains seem quieter than before, as if the fresh layer of snow has absorbed every unnecessary sound. You keep both hands firmly on the steering wheel. Driving here demands complete attention. The road is little more than a narrow ribbon cut into the side of the mountain. On one side rises a wall of frozen rock. On the other, the ground disappears sharply into a valley where streams lie hidden beneath thick sheets of ice. There is little room for mistakes. Every few hundred yards, the convoy slows. Not because the route is unfamiliar, because every bend must be taken carefully. A fully loaded cargo truck weighs several tons. Even with tire chains, ice has a way of reminding drivers that physics cannot be ignored. Sudden braking can send a truck sliding. Accelerating too quickly can cause the wheels to spin uselessly against polished ice. Patience becomes another essential piece of equipment. Inside the cab, the windshield slowly begins to frost over again. You wipe a small clear patch with the sleeve of your jacket, only to watch fresh crystals form minutes later. There is no heater powerful enough to overcome the bitter Korean winter. Warm air escapes almost as quickly as it is produced. The cab smells faintly of diesel fuel, engine oil, and damp wool. It is a smell every military driver comes to know. Around noon, the convoy reaches a steep incline that has caused problems for previous supply runs. Snow has been packed down by earlier vehicles, creating a smooth layer of ice beneath the surface. The lead truck slows almost to a crawl. One by one, the vehicles begin the climb. Engines grow louder, gearboxes strain. Dark clouds of exhaust drift into the cold air. Halfway up the hill, one truck loses traction. Its rear wheels spin helplessly, scattering snow behind them. The convoy stops. No horns, no shouting. Everyone already knows what to do. Drivers climb from their vehicles while mechanics collect shovels, spare chains, and bags of sand carried for exactly this purpose. Snow is cleared away from the tires. Sand is spread across the ice to improve grip. Tire chains are tightened once again. The work is slow. Nobody rushes. Cold fingers make haste impossible. After nearly 20 minutes, the truck tries again. This time, the wheels bite firmly into the road. Slowly, almost reluctantly, the vehicle climbs the hill. A few Marines smile, not because it is an extraordinary achievement, but because another obstacle has quietly been overcome. The convoy moves forward once more. These delays never appear on military maps. A battle report might simply state that supplies arrived late. It rarely explains that 20 men spent half an hour kneeling in the snow so one truck could continue climbing a frozen mountain road. As the afternoon passes, the weather changes again. The snowfall becomes heavier. Visibility shrinks. The truck ahead fades into a pale silhouette, visible only by the faint glow of its covered taillights. Drivers reduce their speed even further, maintaining careful spacing despite the temptation to stay close together. Navigation becomes increasingly difficult. Road signs are almost non-existent. Instead, drivers rely on memory, maps, and the guidance of convoy commanders who know every dangerous bend. Some sections of road have been marked with simple wooden stakes pushed into the snow. Without them, it would be difficult to tell where the road ends and the mountainside begins. A sudden gust of wind sweeps across the valley. Loose snow dances through the air, briefly erasing the tracks left by the convoy only moments before. Winter seems determined to reclaim every road built through its mountains. During a short halt, you step from the cab to stretch your legs. Immediately, the cold reminds you how comfortable the truck had actually been. The wind cuts through layers of clothing. Your boots sink into fresh snow. Nearby, a mechanic checks the temperature of an engine block by placing a gloved hand carefully against the metal. Another Marine refills a radiator with heated water carried inside insulated containers. These small maintenance stops are carefully planned. Ignoring them could leave a truck stranded miles from help. You eat lunch standing beside the vehicle. A ration tin, hard biscuits, cold meat. The coffee poured earlier into a thermos is no longer hot, but it is not frozen. That alone feels like success. Conversation remains quiet. Someone mentions how many miles remain. Another wonders whether tomorrow's weather will be worse. No one speaks about going home. The mountains seem too vast for thoughts like that. The convoy starts again. As daylight slowly begins to fade, long shadows stretch across the road. The mountains grow darker. The air grows colder. Far ahead, faint columns of smoke rise from Hagaru-ri, where more Marines wait for the supplies, now slowly making their way through the snow. Every crate in your truck has already been promised to someone. Medical supplies for the aid station, fuel for generators, food for exhausted men, replacement parts for damaged vehicles. Nothing is unnecessary. Nothing can be left behind. Looking through the windshield, you realize something remarkable. The road itself has become the battlefield, not because bullets are flying, but because every mile demands discipline, patience, teamwork, and endurance. The enemy is distance. The enemy is ice. The enemy is mechanical failure. The enemy is the simple possibility that tomorrow's convoy may not make it through at all. As evening approaches and the headlights begin illuminating swirling snowflakes ahead, you tighten your grip on the steering wheel once more. The mountains remain silent. The convoy continues forward, one careful mile after another, and with every turn of the wheels, you begin to understand that history is not sustained only by those who stand on the front lines. Sometimes it is sustained by the quiet determination of ordinary drivers who refuse to stop, no matter how unforgiving the road becomes. When winter became the enemy. The untold human stories of the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, By the time the convoy reaches the outskirts of Hagaru-ri, daylight is already beginning to fade. The mountains cast long shadows across the valley, and the pale winter sun hangs low above the ridgelines before disappearing behind them. After hours spent gripping the steering wheel, your shoulders ache from the constant tension of driving icy roads. The vibration of the engine has become so familiar that when you finally ease your foot from the accelerator, the silence almost feels unsettling. One by one, the trucks roll through the perimeter. Marines stationed along the road offer brief waves as the convoy enters the camp. There is no celebration. Supply convoys arrive almost every day when weather and road conditions allow. Their arrival is expected, but never taken for granted. The engines continue idling while unloading begins. The routine has been practiced many times before. A clipboard appears. Vehicle numbers are called. Cargo manifests are checked against handwritten inventories. Nothing leaves a truck until it has been accounted for. Military logistics depend upon precision. A missing crate is not simply a number on a report. It may contain medical supplies needed by an aid station, batteries required for field radios, or ammunition reserved for a company guarding the surrounding hills. Every box has a destination, and every destination depends upon someone keeping careful records. You climb down from the cab and stretch your legs. The cold greets you immediately. Nearby, Marines form small unloading teams. One crate after another is carried from the truck beds and stacked in neat rows. Boxes marked rations, wooden cases containing .30 caliber ammunition, medical chests with red crosses painted on their sides, drums of diesel fuel rolled carefully across frozen ground. Everything moves with quiet efficiency. No one wastes movement. No one rushes. Everyone understands that daylight is disappearing quickly. A young supply clerk kneels beside a crate, carefully marking each delivery in a ledger. His pencil has been sharpened so many times that it is barely longer than his hand. He pauses occasionally to warm stiff fingers before continuing to write. It is ordinary work, yet without those records, tomorrow's convoy might carry the wrong supplies, or fail to bring enough. Not far away, an army engineer unloads spare bridge timbers, steel tools, and coils of communication wire. Roads through the Chosin Reservoir region required constant maintenance. Heavy vehicles damaged frozen surfaces. Culverts collapsed. Snowdrifts buried narrow sections of road overnight. Engineers often worked almost continuously, simply to keep the supply route open for another day. The battle depended as much upon shovels and bulldozers as rifles. As evening settles across Hagaru-ri, field kitchens prepare another meal. The smell of hot stew drifts through the camp. Drivers are invited to eat before beginning maintenance on their trucks. You carry your metal mess tin to a nearby bench made from rough timber. Steam rises from the food. The first spoonful is almost painfully hot after breathing freezing air for hours. Around you, conversations remain calm. Someone discusses tire chains worn thin by the icy roads. Another driver mentions a radiator hose that will need replacing before morning. A mechanic quietly predicts that temperatures will fall even lower overnight. No one complains. The work simply continues. After dinner, your attention returns to the truck. Tomorrow's journey begins tonight. The fuel tank is topped off. The oil level is checked. Snow packed beneath the wheel arches is chipped away before it freezes solid. A grease gun appears. Moving parts receive careful attention despite the bitter cold. One Marine wipes every headlamp clean so they will shine clearly through tomorrow's snowfall. Another checks the spare tire. Maintenance never truly ends. It only pauses briefly between journeys. As darkness deepens, the motor pool fills with familiar sounds. The gentle tapping of tools, the steady hum of idling engines, the clink of metal fuel cans being stacked neatly together. Some drivers roll blankets beneath their trucks to inspect suspension components shielded from the wind. Others simply sit on empty ammunition crates, drinking coffee while staring quietly at the snow-covered mountains surrounding the camp. There is a feeling shared by everyone here. Tomorrow, the convoy will leave again. The roads will still be frozen. The hills will still be steep. The weather will still be unforgiving. Nothing about the journey will become easier, yet no one seriously considers refusing the assignment. Because somewhere farther north, Marines wait for food, for ammunition, for medicine, for fuel, for mail from home. A single convoy cannot end the hardships of winter, but it can carry enough supplies to help another unit endure one more day. As the evening grows quieter, You walk beyond the rows of parked trucks for a moment. The stars have returned, bright, sharp, unmoving above the frozen mountains. Looking across the valley, it is difficult to imagine that these same roads will soon witness one of the most demanding withdrawals in modern military history. At this moment, however, the trucks stand ready, their engines cooling beneath the clear winter sky, waiting patiently for another dawn. History often remembers the commanders who planned operations and the infantry who held the ridges. Less often does it remember the drivers who spent endless hours guiding heavy trucks through snow-covered mountain roads, carrying the ordinary things that allowed extraordinary endurance. A warm meal, a crate of rifle cartridges, a radio battery, a blanket, a letter written thousands of miles away. These were not glamorous cargoes, yet together they formed the lifeline of the 1st Marine Division. Without them, courage alone would never have been enough. As you pull your coat tighter against the deepening cold and take one final look at the convoy resting beneath the stars, a quiet realization settles in. Sometimes the most important victories are never announced. Sometimes they arrive slowly, in low gear, along a frozen mountain road, one truck at a time. And perhaps that is the enduring lesson of the Chosin Reservoir. Not only that ordinary men survived extraordinary conditions, but that countless acts of quiet responsibility, driving, repairing, recording, unloading, and preparing for tomorrow, became just as essential to history as any battlefield charge. Long before the first convoy begins its climb through the mountains, long before cooks prepare coffee or sentries are relieved from their posts, another group of Marines is already awake. You are one of them. The watch on your wrist reads a little after 4 in the morning. The camp is still mostly asleep. Only a handful of lights glow through canvas command tents, their yellow light softened by layers of frost that have formed overnight. The stars remain bright overhead, and the cold feels almost absolute. Every breath hangs in the air before drifting away like smoke. Your destination is not a foxhole, it is the motor pool. Rows of trucks, jeeps, bulldozers, and utility vehicles stand silently beneath a blanket of fresh snow. In daylight, they appear strong and dependable. At this hour, they resemble frozen monuments, their metal bodies coated in white, their tires half buried beneath drifting snow. To most Marines, they are simply vehicles. To you, they are patience. Every morning begins with the same question. Which one refuses to wake today? You carry a metal toolbox, whose handle bites through thick gloves with surprising force. Inside are ordinary tools. Spanners, socket wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, a grease gun, spare spark plugs, rolls of wire, and small replacement parts. Nothing inside appears remarkable, yet every item has earned its place through experience. There are no unnecessary tools here. Every ounce must justify the effort of carrying it. The first truck belongs to yesterday's supply convoy. Its engine was running well when it returned, but that guarantees nothing after a night like this. Korean winters are unforgiving to machinery. Temperatures well below freezing cause lubricating oil to thicken until it resembles heavy syrup. Batteries lose much of their strength. Rubber hoses become rigid. Diesel fuel can begin to gel. Machines do not complain. They simply stop working. You brush away snow from the hood and release the latch. The hinges groan softly. A flashlight reveals an engine surrounded by delicate crystals of ice. Every exposed metal surface sparkles beneath the beam. It looks almost beautiful. Then the inspection begins. Oil level, coolant, fan belt, fuel line, battery terminals. Nothing is rushed. Mechanical problems often hide inside ordinary details. Beside you, another mechanic attempts to start a nearby jeep. The starter turns slowly. Once, twice, then silence. Nobody is surprised. He lifts the hood without saying a word. The diagnosis begins before frustration has a chance to appear. This calm approach has become part of life at Chosin. Anger fixes nothing. Patience often fixes everything. As more mechanics arrive, the motor pool slowly comes alive. The sound of tools striking metal echoes gently across the camp. A wrench slips onto a frozen bolt. Someone pumps fresh grease into a suspension fitting. Another mechanic gently warms a fuel filter before reinstalling it. Every task is deliberate. Every movement conserves energy. The cold punishes unnecessary effort. Nearby, a portable stove burns inside a sheltered maintenance tent. Small parts that have become too cold to handle are placed near its warmth for a few minutes before repairs continue. Batteries removed overnight are carefully checked and reinstalled. Engine oil stored inside heated containers flows more freely than oil left exposed to the freezing air. These are lessons learned through experience. The manuals offer guidance. Winter offers examinations. The first successful engine start of the morning always attracts quiet attention. A mechanic climbs into the driver's seat. The starter motor turns. The engine coughs. Then, with a deep rumbling growl, it comes alive. Grey exhaust rolls into the cold air. Several Marines glance up briefly before returning to their own work. One engine down, many more to go. As dawn slowly approaches, the motor pool grows louder. Diesel engines idle steadily. Generators begin supplying electricity to command posts. A bulldozer starts after several determined attempts, its tracks grinding gently against frozen earth. The camp itself is waking. Yet few Marines notice how much work has already been completed before breakfast. When they climb into their trucks later this morning, most will simply turn a key or press a starter. They may never know that a mechanic spent an hour replacing a cracked fuel line while kneeling in snow before sunrise. That is the nature of maintenance. Success often becomes invisible. Only failure attracts attention. You wipe grease from your gloves and look across the rows of vehicles. Some are already warming their engines. Others still wait patiently for repair. The work is far from finished. In truth, it never truly finishes. Every mile driven today will create another inspection tomorrow. Every successful convoy will return carrying fresh mechanical problems. The machines keep the army moving. The mechanics keep the machines alive. As the first light of morning reaches the tops of the surrounding mountains, you close another engine compartment and hear its steady idle settle into a smooth rhythm. For a brief moment, the camp feels ready. The roads are waiting, the drivers are gathering, the convoys will soon depart. And before another long day begins, one quiet thought crosses your mind. How many lives depended upon an engine that started because someone chose to inspect one small bolt before dawn? The morning convoy has departed. One by one, the trucks disappeared into the mountain roads, their engines fading into the distance until only the winter wind remained. For a few moments, the motor pool feels unusually quiet. It never stays that way for long. Mechanical work follows a different rhythm from the battlefield. There are no clear beginnings or endings. A vehicle leaves in good condition and returns needing attention. Another arrives from a forward position with a problem that cannot wait until tomorrow. Before one repair is finished, another is already beginning. You wipe frost from your toolbox and walk toward a truck that arrived during the night. The driver reported only one concern. The engine lost power on the last hill. That single sentence could mean many things. A clogged fuel filter, frozen fuel, a damaged injector, air trapped inside the fuel system. Mechanical work begins not with certainty, but with questions. You lift the hood. The metal is painfully cold, even through thick gloves. A flashlight beam moves slowly across the engine compartment. Nothing appears broken. No leaking coolant, no loose fan belt, no obvious damage. Experience teaches you not to trust first impressions. Many problems hide where they cannot be seen. Nearby, another mechanic removes the fuel filter and places it carefully inside a maintenance tent where a small stove burns steadily. In temperatures far below freezing, tiny amounts of moisture trapped inside fuel systems can freeze into crystals, restricting the flow of diesel. The solution is rarely dramatic. Patience, warmth, careful inspection. The truck is repaired one small step at a time. Across the motor pool, a Jeep refuses to start at all. Its battery has weakened after another night of extreme cold. Rather than replacing it immediately, 2 Marines carry the battery into a heated shelter where it can slowly regain enough warmth to produce a stronger electrical charge. Nothing is wasted. Replacement parts are valuable. Every repair begins with the simplest solution first. The Korean winter has taught everyone the importance of conservation. Outside, snow begins falling once again. Large flakes drift gently across the camp, settling on parked vehicles almost as quickly as mechanics brush them away. Someone laughs quietly. You clear the snow once, and winter puts it right back. The joke earns tired smiles. Humor survives surprisingly well in difficult places. It asks for very little. A few moments later, another convoy returns earlier than expected. One of the lead trucks developed steering problems on an icy descent. The driver noticed unusual resistance while turning the wheel and wisely decided not to continue. That decision may have prevented an accident. The truck is guided carefully into the maintenance area. Immediately, mechanics begin working together. One checks the steering linkage. Another inspects the suspension. A third searches for damage beneath the chassis. No one works alone for long. Military maintenance is built upon teamwork. One flashlight, several pairs of hands, shared experience. Within half an hour, the problem is found. A steering component has stiffened after ice formed around a moving joint. The repair itself is straightforward. Finding it required patience. As the afternoon passes, generators become another priority. Electricity powers radios, medical equipment, lighting, and command posts throughout the camp. A generator failure affects far more than comfort. You kneel beside one whose engine has begun running unevenly. The sound immediately catches your attention. Experienced mechanics often diagnose problems long before opening an engine. Every machine develops its own voice. A healthy engine produces a steady rhythm. A damaged one hesitates, misses, vibrates differently. You remove the air filter, brush away accumulated ice, check the fuel supply. A few careful adjustments later, the engine settles into its familiar, dependable hum. Another quiet success. Another machine returned to service. Throughout the afternoon, drivers stop by the motor pool carrying small requests. A loose mirror, a worn tire chain, a cracked headlamp lens. None of these jobs is urgent by itself. Together, they fill every hour. The mechanics rarely stop moving. Yet there is never any sense of panic, only steady purpose. Maintenance rewards consistency more than speed. As daylight begins fading, the temperature falls once again. Tool handles become colder. Metal bolts tighten as they contract. Grease thickens. The same environment challenging infantrymen in their foxholes challenges mechanics beneath trucks. Different work, the same winter. Before darkness arrives completely, every vehicle scheduled for tomorrow receives one final inspection. Fuel tanks are topped off, windshields cleaned, chains tightened, engine compartments checked once more. The routine never changes because experience has proven its value. The best repair is often the problem prevented before it begins. As evening settles across Hagaru-ri, you finally close your toolbox. Your gloves are stained with grease. Your knees ache from hours spent kneeling on frozen ground. Your hands smell faintly of diesel fuel despite repeated washing. The day's work leaves no dramatic story, no medals, no newspaper headlines. Yet somewhere tonight, a convoy will reach its destination safely because a brake line was inspected. A generator will continue powering a field hospital because someone replaced a worn fuel filter. A Marine will receive hot food because a truck engine started before dawn. The connection is almost invisible, but it is real. History often celebrates those who stand in front. It speaks less frequently of those who quietly ensure that everyone else can continue standing at all. You look across the rows of vehicles now resting beneath another clear winter sky. Tomorrow morning they will wake again, and so will you, ready to solve another collection of ordinary problems that together determine whether an army keeps moving. As darkness covers the mountains once more, one final thought remains. Perhaps the strongest machine in any army is not the truck or the tank, but the quiet determination of the people willing to repair them day after freezing day. Another morning begins before the sun. The mountains remain hidden beneath darkness, and the air feels sharper than the day before. Frost has settled over every vehicle in the motor pool, coating hoods, mirrors, and steel bumpers in a thin layer of white crystals. It is difficult to tell where the snow ends and the machines begin. You arrive carrying the same metal toolbox. Its weight feels familiar now. The routine is familiar too. Walk the rows, inspect every vehicle, listen before touching, observe before repairing. These habits have become almost instinctive. One by one, engines are brought back to life. Some start immediately, rewarding yesterday's careful maintenance. Others hesitate, forcing mechanics to diagnose another hidden problem before the convoy can leave. A weak battery here, a frozen fuel line there, a cracked hose discovered just in time. No two mornings are exactly alike, yet every morning begins with the same quiet determination. Nearby, a bulldozer operator prepares his machine for another day. Unlike the cargo trucks, his work rarely carries supplies. Instead, it keeps the road itself alive. During the Chosin campaign, engineers used bulldozers to clear snow, remove fallen rocks, and widen narrow sections of road whenever possible. Without that work, supply convoys would have faced even greater delays, and damaged vehicles might never have reached the mechanics waiting behind the lines. An army depends upon more than weapons. It depends upon roads. It depends upon bridges. It depends upon engines that continue turning despite conditions they were never designed to endure. You finish inspecting a transport truck just as its driver approaches. He thanks you quietly before climbing into the cab. The exchange lasts only a few seconds. No speeches, no ceremony. Yet both of you understand something important. Your work and his work are connected. If the truck fails, the convoy fails. If the convoy fails, food, ammunition, and medical supplies fail to arrive. Responsibility travels from one pair of hands to another. The convoy departs. The engines grow quieter as they disappear into the mountains. You remain behind. There is always more work. A portable generator used by the field hospital requires servicing. The hospital depends upon electricity for lights, heating equipment, and radio communications. Doctors and corpsmen work through long winter nights treating frostbite, illness, and battle injuries. The generator cannot be allowed to fail. You remove its protective cover and begin another careful inspection. Fuel, oil, cooling system, electrical connections. Nothing dramatic. Nothing hurried, just another machine quietly supporting dozens of lives. Across the camp, another mechanic repairs a portable heater destined for a command tent. Elsewhere, a welder reinforces a damaged trailer hitch using equipment sheltered beneath a canvas maintenance area. Everywhere you look, ordinary repairs continue. History rarely pauses to notice them. Yet without them, history itself would have unfolded differently. As afternoon approaches, fresh snow begins falling. At first, only a few flakes drift through the still air. Then the snowfall grows heavier. Mechanics pull canvas covers across exposed engines. Toolboxes are closed between jobs to keep moisture away from delicate instruments. The weather dictates every movement. No one argues with winter, they simply adapt. A radio message arrives from a convoy farther north. One truck has broken an axle after striking hidden ice. Recovery crews prepare immediately. Another vehicle is loaded with tools, jacks, replacement parts, tow cables, and extra fuel. There is no hesitation. Some repairs cannot wait until morning. Within minutes, the recovery truck disappears along the frozen road. Its crew understands they may spend hours working in darkness before returning. They go anyway, because another truck is waiting. Another driver is depending on them. Another convoy cannot continue until the problem is solved. Late in the afternoon, you walk briefly to the edge of the motor pool. From there, the surrounding mountains appear endless. The roads winding between them are barely visible beneath fresh snow. It is easy to forget how many miles those roads cover, how many engines travel them each day, how many people rely upon them without ever meeting the mechanics who keep them running. The realization is strangely peaceful. Not every contribution needs recognition. Some of the most important work is meant simply to be done well. As evening arrives, the recovery truck finally returns. Its headlights appear first through the falling snow. Behind it comes the damaged cargo truck, now safely towed back into camp. The axle will require extensive repairs. That work will begin tomorrow. No one seems discouraged. Mechanical problems are expected here. They are not failures. They are simply another task waiting patiently to be completed. Night settles over Hagaru-ri once again. Engines are switched off one by one. The steady hum that filled the motor pool throughout the day slowly fades until only a few generators continue running. Mechanics clean their tools before returning them carefully to their boxes. A wrench left outside overnight may become difficult to use tomorrow. Even tools require care during a Korean winter. Before leaving, you take one final walk between the silent vehicles. Hours from now, frost will once again cover every windshield. Snow will settle across every hood. Morning will bring another round of inspections, another collection of repairs, another convoy. The cycle never truly ends. Years later, visitors to museums would admire restored trucks from the Korean War. They would read about famous battles, legendary commanders, and remarkable acts of courage. Far fewer would think about the mechanics who worked before sunrise, their gloves blackened with grease, their breath freezing in the air as they tightened one more bolt or replaced one more hose. Yet those quiet moments mattered. Every repaired engine carried food. Every repaired truck carried medicine. Every repaired generator carried warmth into a hospital tent. Sometimes, hope did not arrive on horseback or in grand speeches. Sometimes, hope arrived with the deep, steady sound of a diesel engine that someone refused to let die. And perhaps that is one of the quiet truths hidden within the story of the Chosin Reservoir. Wars are remembered through battles, but they are endured through ordinary people performing ordinary work with extraordinary consistency. The mechanics rarely stood on the front pages of newspapers. They stood beside open engine bays, and in doing so, they helped keep an entire division alive through one of the coldest campaigns in modern military history. Before dawn reaches the mountains, the aid station is already awake. There is no bugle, no whistle, only the soft glow of hurricane lanterns shining through layers of canvas and the quiet footsteps of corpsmen moving carefully between folding cots. You are one of them. The night shift has almost ended, but in truth there are no real shifts here. Someone is always awake. Someone is always preparing bandages, heating water, checking medical supplies, or comforting another exhausted Marine. Outside, the temperature has fallen well below freezing once again. Inside the tent, it is only slightly warmer. A small oil stove burns steadily in one corner, doing everything it can against a Korean winter that seems determined to enter through every seam of the canvas. Frost has gathered along the inside walls, sparkling whenever the lantern light catches it. The first task of the morning is not treating wounds, it is taking inventory. You kneel beside wooden medical chests and carefully count what remains. Bandages, morphine syrettes, sulfur powder, plasma, splints, medical scissors. Every item is written neatly into a small ledger. Supply convoys work tirelessly to reach the front, but no one knows exactly when the next shipment will arrive. Every dressing and every bottle must therefore be used with care. Waste is a luxury the mountains do not allow. A kettle of water simmers gently over the stove. Clean water is constantly needed. Metal instruments are warmed before use. Cloth bandages stiffen quickly if left exposed to the cold. Even simple medical tasks become more complicated when everything around you is freezing. Outside the entrance, snow crunches beneath approaching boots. 2 Marines help a third man into the tent. He is walking. That is encouraging. But his face tells another story. His cheeks are pale. His gloves are soaked. When he removes one boot, his foot shows the earliest signs of frostbite. The corpsman beside you nods quietly. Good thing you came in now. There is no panic. Early treatment matters. The frozen boot is removed carefully. Dry socks replace damp ones. The injured foot is warmed gradually, not with intense heat, but slowly and patiently. Corpsmen during the Korean War learned that rapid warming or rubbing frozen tissue could cause additional damage. Much of your work involves preventing small injuries from becoming permanent ones. The Marine thanks you softly before returning to his unit. He is fortunate. Others arrive in more difficult condition. As morning light slowly filters through the canvas, another stretcher is carried inside. This Marine has spent hours exposed to the cold while helping repair a disabled truck. His hands are badly chilled. He apologizes repeatedly for making trouble. The apology surprises you. Many men worry about leaving their unit behind. Corpsmen hear the same concern again and again. When can I go back? Will I miss the convoy? Is my squad still outside? Even while receiving treatment, thoughts remain with the men still standing watch beyond the tent. The aid station is quiet. but never silent. Someone pours hot coffee. A kettle whistles softly. Medical instruments clink together inside metal trays. A clerk updates patient records with careful handwriting despite fingers stiffened by the cold. Each sound blends into a calm rhythm. Outside, trucks continue arriving with supplies. Inside, another kind of work continues. Not dramatic, not hurried, simply constant. Around midday, a corpsman opens a crate delivered by the latest convoy. Fresh bandages, blankets, medical gloves, a few bottles of antibiotics. The delivery brings visible relief. No celebration follows, only quiet gratitude. The inventory ledger is updated once again. The routine begins anew. Later, an officer visits the aid station. He is not seriously injured. He has come to ask about the condition of several Marines treated during the night. The conversation lasts only a few minutes. Names are exchanged, conditions discussed, plans made for those who can return to duty and those who require evacuation farther south. These decisions are never easy. Every Marine matters. Every experienced man leaving the line changes the strength of his unit. Yet sending someone back too soon could be even more dangerous. Outside, the weather changes once again. Fine snow begins drifting across the valley. The mountains disappear behind a curtain of white. Visibility drops. The world beyond the tent grows quiet. You pause briefly at the entrance. Across the camp, mechanics continue working beneath open-engine hoods. Drivers prepare another convoy. Sentries walk slowly between defensive positions. Every person performs a different task, yet all of them depend upon one another. The mechanic keeps the truck moving. The driver delivers the supplies. The cook prepares the meal. The corpsman helps exhausted men return safely to their unit. Each role is small by itself. Together, they become the foundation of survival. As afternoon slowly fades toward another bitterly cold evening, you replace fresh bandages inside their storage box and straighten the blankets on an empty cot waiting for its next patient. You hope it remains empty. Experience tells you it will not. The lanterns are trimmed, the stove is refueled. Hot water is placed over the flame once again. The aid station prepares quietly for another night. Because winter never truly rests, neither do the corpsmen. And as the wind begins whispering against the canvas walls once more, a gentle thought settles into your mind. In a place where the cold seemed determined to take something from everyone, perhaps the greatest act of courage was simply helping another person endure one more night. Evening arrives quietly over Hagaru-ri. The last light fades behind the mountains and the temperature begins its familiar descent. Outside the aid station, Marines pull their parkas tighter as they make their way between foxholes, command tents, and vehicle parks. The snow reflects the faint glow of lanterns, making the valley appear almost peaceful despite the hardship it holds. Inside the aid station, there is no true beginning or end to the work. One patient leaves, another arrives, a kettle is emptied, another is placed on the stove. The rhythm continues without interruption. You trim the wick of a lantern until its flame burns steadily. Light is precious here. It must be bright enough to examine injuries, yet dim enough not to advertise the station's location across the frozen valley. Shadows dance gently across the canvas walls as the stove hums in the corner. A corpsman beside you opens the medical ledger. Every patient is recorded. Name, unit, condition, treatment given. Whether he returned to duty or required evacuation. The careful handwriting may seem ordinary, but those pages will one day help families, commanders, and historians understand what happened here. Even in war, records matter. A pair of Marines enters carrying another soldier between them. He apologizes before anyone asks a question. "I'm sorry, I slipped." His injury is not caused by enemy fire. While unloading supplies from a truck, he lost his footing on a sheet of hidden ice and twisted his ankle badly enough that he can no longer walk without assistance. The corpsman smiles reassuringly. No apologies needed. His boot is removed carefully. The ankle is examined for swelling. A splint is prepared. In another place, it would be considered a minor injury. At Chosin, every injury matters. A single Marine unable to carry ammunition, drive a truck, or stand watch changes the workload for everyone else. Later in the evening, another patient arrives. This Marine has spent hours operating a machine gun in an exposed position. His fingers have become dangerously cold. You remember your training. Never warm frozen tissue too quickly. Never rub frostbitten skin. Patience is as important as medicine. Warm blankets are wrapped around his shoulders, while hot drinks are prepared. His gloves are replaced with dry ones taken from limited supplies. Gradually, feeling begins to return. He smiles weakly. So, that's what my fingers are supposed to feel like. The small joke earns quiet laughter. Humor remains surprisingly resilient. Sometimes it is the only warmth available. Outside, the wind grows stronger. Snow taps softly against the canvas walls. The stove struggles to keep pace with the cold pressing in from every direction. One corpsman quietly adds another piece of fuel before checking the water heating above the flame. Warm water serves many purposes: cleaning wounds, preparing hot drinks, warming chilled hands. Even something as simple as washing medical instruments becomes more difficult when water threatens to freeze. Throughout the night, supply boxes are opened one by one. Bandages are folded neatly. Morphine syrettes are counted again. Blankets are shaken free of snow before being stored for the next patient. Nothing is thrown away carelessly. Every piece of equipment may be needed before dawn. Near midnight, the aid station grows briefly quieter. Most of the patients are sleeping. One Marine dreams softly, calling out the name of someone back home before settling once more beneath his blanket. Another writes a short letter beneath the lantern's light. His handwriting is slow because his hands remain stiff from the cold. The letter is simple, a few lines telling his family he is safe, a promise not to worry. Words chosen carefully because paper is limited and time is short. Whether that letter will reach home remains uncertain. The roads are dangerous, the weather unpredictable. Still, he writes, hope often travels farther than certainty. You step outside for a moment. The air is startlingly cold. The sky above the reservoir is brilliantly clear. Thousands of stars stretch across the darkness, brighter than most people ever see in peacetime. Somewhere beyond the ridgelines, other Marines continue their watch. Drivers prepare tomorrow's convoy. Mechanics finish late-night repairs beneath hooded flashlights. The entire division remains awake in different ways. Each person carries a different responsibility. Together, they carry one another. Returning inside, you notice a corpsman quietly repairing a torn blanket with needle and thread. Replacing it is impossible. Repairing it is practical. Small acts like this happen constantly throughout the camp. A broken buckle, a cracked lantern handle, a worn medical bag. Nothing useful is discarded if it can still serve another day. As the hours move toward dawn, exhaustion settles over everyone. Coffee cups stand half empty on a wooden table. The stove burns lower now. The lantern flame flickers gently whenever the wind pushes against the canvas. You check the medical supplies one final time before morning. There are fewer bandages than yesterday, less coffee, less fuel. Yet there is enough. Enough for another day. Enough to keep helping. Enough to continue. That realization brings a quiet sense of comfort. The Korean winter has taught everyone here the value of enough. Not abundance, not certainty, simply enough to keep moving forward. Outside, the eastern horizon begins to lighten almost imperceptibly. Another long night has passed. The aid station remains standing. Its patients are warmer than they were a few hours ago. Its lantern still burns. Its corpsmen are still working. History often remembers the dramatic moments of war, but nights like this rarely appear in photographs. No famous speeches were made, no decisive battle was fought, only a handful of ordinary people quietly caring for one another while winter pressed against the walls. And perhaps those unseen hours reveal something just as important as any battlefield victory. For every life remembered in history, there were countless acts of kindness, patience, and quiet competence that made survival possible. As dawn slowly returns to the frozen mountains, one gentle question remains. When history grows silent, are the smallest acts of compassion sometimes the ones that echo the longest? Morning arrives almost unnoticed. The lanterns inside the aid station still burn, though their light has grown faint against the pale grey glow filtering through the canvas walls. Outside, another bitterly cold day begins in the mountains. Snow that fell during the night has settled quietly across the camp, covering vehicle tracks, empty ration boxes, and the footprints of Marines who had stood watch until dawn. You have been awake for many hours. Exhaustion lingers behind your eyes, yet the work continues. It always does. The first task is simple. Walk slowly between the cots, check each patient, feel foreheads for fever, examine bandages, ask quiet questions. How are your hands this morning? Can you move your toes? Any pain? Some Marines answer with only a nod. Others manage a tired smile. A few are already preparing to return to their units. Their injuries have improved enough to resume duty, and despite the warmth of the aid station, most are eager to rejoin the men with whom they have shared weeks of hardship. One young Marine sits carefully on the edge of his cot, pulling on a fresh pair of wool socks. They feel strange, he says softly, flexing his feet. The corpsman beside him nods. That's a good sign. Yesterday, he could barely feel his toes. Today, sensation has returned. Recovery comes in small victories. Across the tent, another patient prepares for a very different journey. His frostbite is more severe. The decision has been made to evacuate him farther south, where larger medical facilities can provide treatment unavailable in the forward area. He does not argue, but disappointment shows clearly on his face. I wanted to stay. The words are barely above a whisper. You understand. Many Marines felt a deep responsibility toward their units. Leaving, even because of injury, could feel like abandoning friends. A senior corpsman rests a hand gently on his shoulder. You've done your part. Now let us do ours. There is no further discussion. Sometimes reassurance is more powerful than explanation. Outside, the camp begins another day. Supply trucks arrive one by one, their tires crunching across frozen snow. Mechanics already work beneath open-engine hoods. The smell of diesel drifts faintly into the aid station whenever someone lifts the canvas flap. Somewhere nearby, cooks prepare breakfast. The familiar aroma of coffee reaches the tent. It is remarkable how comforting that simple smell has become. Coffee means warmth. Warmth means another beginning. A convoy of ambulances arrives shortly afterward. Their engines continue idling while corpsmen prepare patients for transport. Blankets are tucked carefully around shoulders. Medical notes are secured inside waterproof envelopes. Names are checked once again. Nothing is rushed. Every patient deserves careful attention before beginning the long journey south. Loading the ambulances is quiet work. No shouting, no confusion, only steady cooperation. One stretcher at a time, one blanket adjusted, one reassuring word offered before the doors close. As the vehicles disappear down the frozen road, you wonder where those men will be weeks from now. Perhaps recovering in a hospital, perhaps already sailing home, perhaps remembering this little aid station only as a warm tent beneath snowy mountains. Back inside, empty cots are straightened, blankets folded, medical instruments cleaned. The stove is refueled. There is no time to dwell on departures. The next patients may arrive at any moment. By midday, the tent receives another delivery of medical supplies. The convoy has brought fresh bandages, plasma, antiseptics, and much-needed blankets. The relief among the corpsmen is immediate, though quietly expressed. One carefully arranges the new supplies on wooden shelves. Another updates the inventory ledger. Every crate represents countless miles traveled through dangerous mountain roads. Every bandage has already passed through factories, warehouses, ships, trains, trucks, and finally the hands of convoy drivers before reaching this small tent in northeastern Korea. War is often described through battles, less often through journeys. Yet healing depends upon journeys too. A bottle of medicine cannot help anyone until it arrives. As afternoon light reflects brightly from the snow outside, the aid station grows briefly peaceful. Several patients sleep. A corpsman writes a letter home during a rare, quiet moment. Another carefully sharpens pencils used for medical records. Simple tasks fill the silence. The ordinary has become extraordinary here. Toward evening, you step outside once more. The mountains stand exactly as they did yesterday, silent, frozen, unmoved by human struggle. The wind carries distant sounds from the camp, a truck engine starting, a hammer striking metal, someone laughing softly at a joke you cannot hear. Life continues, not because conditions have improved, but because people continue choosing to help one another despite them. You think back over the past days, the sentries who remained awake through freezing nights, the truck drivers who carried food across icy roads, the mechanics who refused to let engines fail, the cooks who prepared hot meals before sunrise, the engineers who kept the roads open, the radio operators who stayed beside crackling sets long after midnight. Every person played a part. The aid station simply stood at the point where all those efforts came together. Its purpose was never only to treat wounds, it was to preserve hope. As the first evening stars appear above the Chosin Reservoir once more, you close the medical ledger for the day. Its pages contain only names, dates, and treatments. Yet behind every line is a human story. A frozen hand warmed before permanent damage. A tired Marine encouraged to rest. A quiet conversation that eased fear. A life carried safely toward recovery. History will remember the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir for its extraordinary endurance against overwhelming odds and one of the most remarkable fighting withdrawals in modern military history. But beyond the maps and military reports lies another story. A quieter one. The story of ordinary people who refused to let compassion disappear, even in one of the coldest places on Earth. Perhaps that is why the corpsmen remain so deeply respected in the memories of those who served. They reminded exhausted men that even in war, kindness had not frozen. It still lived inside warm hands, calm voices, and the simple promise that no one would face the night alone. And as darkness gently returns to the mountains for yet another evening, one final thought settles peacefully over the valley. Sometimes the greatest victories are never measured by ground gained or battles won. Sometimes they are measured by the lives quietly saved before the sun rises again. The order does not arrive with raised voices. It is read calmly, repeated carefully, and passed from one unit to the next until every Marine understands the task ahead. The division will move south, not in panic, not in disorder, but in a disciplined withdrawal that will demand every lesson learned during the long weeks in the mountains. You stand beside a truck as the first light of morning spreads across Hagaru-ri. Snow has fallen again during the night, covering yesterday's tire tracks and softening the edges of sandbag walls. The camp is already awake. Drivers warm their engines. Mechanics perform final inspections. Engineers study maps spread across the hood of a jeep, tracing the narrow road that winds toward Hagaru-ri and eventually the port of Hungnam. The journey ahead is measured in miles, but everyone knows it will truly be measured in patience. Unlike an advance, a withdrawal requires carrying everything that can still be saved: fuel, medical supplies, communication equipment, weapons, vehicles, and above all, people. No one wants to leave useful equipment behind, yet commanders also know that overloaded convoys move slowly on frozen roads. Every truck is packed with careful thought. Crates are stacked tightly and tied down with rope that has become stiff in the cold. Tarpaulins are pulled across the cargo and secured against the winter wind. Nearby, supply clerks check manifest one final time. A box counted twice is less likely to disappear. A mistake made here may not be discovered until many miles later. The work is quiet, almost routine. History often imagines withdrawals as scenes of confusion. The Marines at Chosin understood that survival depended upon the opposite: order, discipline, preparation. Before the first vehicle moves, engineers travel ahead to inspect the road. The Korean winter has worked through the night. Fresh drifts block narrow sections. Ice covers bridges. Loose rocks have fallen from frozen hillsides. Bulldozers and road crews move out before the main convoy, clearing obstacles one careful stretch at a time. Without them, the long column of vehicles would soon grind to a halt. At last, engines begin to rumble. One after another, trucks roll forward. The convoy stretches along the mountain road like a slow-moving ribbon of olive drab disappearing into white valleys. You keep your eyes fixed on the vehicle ahead. Spacing is important. Too close, and a sudden stop on the ice could cause a collision. Too far, and the convoy risks becoming separated among the winding roads. Hours pass in steady concentration. No one hurries. The mountains do not reward haste. The road twists around frozen cliffs before descending into narrow valleys where snow lies untouched beneath clusters of leafless trees. Occasionally, the convoy pauses while engineers clear another obstacle or mechanics inspect a vehicle showing signs of trouble. Each stop follows the same familiar rhythm. Drivers step down to stretch stiff legs. Mechanics lift engine hoods. Sentries quietly observe the surrounding ridges. Coffee is poured from insulated containers. Within minutes, the journey begins again. The routine feels almost comforting. Everyone knows exactly what to do. As midday approaches, you pass villages that appear nearly deserted. Thin columns of smoke rise from a few chimneys where Korean families continue their own daily struggle against winter. Children watch silently as the convoy passes. Older villagers gather firewood or carry water despite the freezing temperatures. For them, the war has become part of everyday life. Armies arrive, armies depart. Winter remains. The sight leaves you thoughtful. The campaign has touched everyone living in these mountains, not only those wearing uniforms. Farther down the road, another convoy approaches from the opposite direction. It carries wounded men bound for evacuation farther south. The vehicles slow as they pass each other. Drivers exchange brief waves. No words are necessary. Both groups understand the importance of the other's journey. One convoy brings men away from danger. The other carries supplies needed by those still behind. The road belongs to both. By late afternoon, clouds begin gathering once more. Snowflakes drift lazily across the windshield. The familiar rhythm of the windshield wipers returns. Back and forth, back and forth. A quiet metronome marking another hour on the mountain road. The day's progress has been steady, but no one measures success by speed. Success is counted differently here. Every truck still running, every bridge safely crossed, every marine accounted for, every mile completed without losing the discipline that has carried the division through the harshest winter many of them have ever known. As the convoy prepares to halt before nightfall, you climb down from the cab and look back along the winding road. The line of vehicles disappears around distant bends, their dark shapes standing out against the endless snow. It is an impressive sight, not because it is dramatic, because it represents thousands of ordinary people working together with quiet determination. Drivers, mechanics, engineers, corpsmen, radio operators, cooks, clerks, infantrymen. Every role has helped carry the column this far. The mountains remain silent around you. The road ahead is still long. The port of Hungnam lies many careful miles away. Yet for the first time in many days, another thought begins to grow stronger than the cold. Home. Not tomorrow. Perhaps not even soon. But somewhere beyond these frozen mountains. And as darkness settles gently across the convoy's temporary camp, one quiet question lingers beneath the winter stars. Can the same patience that carried an army into the mountains also carry it safely back again? Morning returns beneath a sky of pale steel. The convoy begins moving before the sun has fully climbed above the mountains. Engines that had idled through the coldest hours of the night settle into their familiar rhythm, filling the frozen valleys with a deep mechanical hum. Frost still clings to every windshield, and the snow beneath the tires crackles like broken glass as the first trucks roll forward. Another day, another stretch of mountain road, another careful step toward Hungnam. You settle behind the steering wheel, wrapping gloved hands around the cold rim before the engine's warmth slowly begins to spread through the cab. Outside, Marines walk beside the convoy one final time, checking tie-down straps, inspecting tire chains, and making certain that nothing has shifted during the night. Every load must remain secure. A single loose crate on these narrow roads could create delays that affect every vehicle behind it. The convoy climbs steadily through another winding pass. The mountains seem even quieter than before. Snow hangs from bare branches. Frozen streams disappear beneath thick sheets of ice. The only movement comes from the slow procession of trucks following one another with practiced discipline. No horns sound, no engines race. Everyone understands that patience is faster than haste on roads like these. Far ahead lies one of the most difficult obstacles of the withdrawal, the Funchulin Pass. The narrow gorge had already become famous among the engineers responsible for keeping the withdrawal route open. Retreating forces had destroyed sections of the bridge spanning the deep ravine, hoping to halt the advance of United Nations troops. Without a crossing, thousands of Marines, soldiers, vehicles, and refugees could become trapped in the mountains. Yet the solution had already begun far from Korea. Engineers in Japan prepared prefabricated steel bridge sections designed by the M2 treadway bridge system. Heavy transport aircraft dropped these massive components by parachute into the mountains, where combat engineers assembled them under freezing conditions. It was one of the most remarkable engineering achievements of the Korean War. As your convoy approaches the area, the signs of that effort become visible everywhere. Fresh bulldozer tracks cut through packed snow. Stacks of timber stand beside the road. Engineers move carefully across the bridge, checking bolts, inspecting steel joints, and clearing ice that has formed overnight. Some kneel beside the structure with wrenches in hand. Others shovel snow away from the approaches. The bridge itself is no longer simply a piece of engineering. It has become a lifeline. The convoy slows to little more than walking speed, one truck at a time. No unnecessary weight is allowed onto the bridge. Drivers maintain exact spacing. Military police stand quietly along the approaches, guiding each vehicle with calm hand signals rather than shouted orders. You ease your truck forward. The steel deck echoes beneath the tires. For a brief moment, you glance through the side window toward the ravine below. Snow-covered rocks disappear into the distance. The drop is enough to remind every driver why precision matters. There is no room for distraction, no room for carelessness. Slowly, almost gently, the truck reaches the far side. Another vehicle follows, then another. The crossing continues hour after hour. No applause marks each successful passage. The engineers simply watch the bridge, ready to respond if even the smallest problem appears. That is their reward, a structure that continues doing its job. Beyond the pass, the road begins descending gradually toward the coast. The landscape changes almost imperceptibly. The mountains remain, but the valleys widen. The air still bites with bitter cold, yet there is the faintest suggestion of lower elevations ahead. During a midday halt, the convoy pulls into a sheltered area beside the road. Drivers climb from their cabs. Mechanics immediately begin another round of inspections. Wheel bearings are checked, engine oil levels measured, brake lines examined for leaks. Snow packed around suspension components is chipped away with small hammers. No vehicle continues without inspection. Experience has taught everyone that tiny mechanical problems become major failures if ignored. Nearby, cooks distribute another meal: hot coffee, beans, canned meat, hard biscuits. The menu changes little from day to day, yet no one seems disappointed. Warm food has become more valuable than variety. A Marine sitting beside you unwraps a letter that finally reached him after weeks of delay. He reads it slowly, then folds it carefully before placing it inside his jacket. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. Home has briefly travelled all the way into these frozen mountains. The convoy resumes its journey. As afternoon light stretches across the snow, groups of Korean civilians begin appearing along the roadside. Many carry small bundles tied with cloth. Others guide ox carts loaded with what remains of their belongings. Families move quietly south, hoping to escape the fighting that has swept repeatedly through their villages. Some wave gently as the military convoy passes, others simply watch. Their own journey is even longer. The sight reminds you that war reaches far beyond soldiers. Entire communities have been living with uncertainty for months. Their endurance deserves remembering too. As evening approaches, distant aircraft appear high overhead. Transport planes, reconnaissance aircraft, occasionally fighters crossing the winter sky. Their engines fade almost as quickly as they arrive, leaving the mountains silent once more. The convoy continues, steadily, patiently, mile after mile. The road has become more than a route between two places. It has become a symbol of discipline. Every successful crossing, every repaired truck, every cleared bridge, every carefully recorded supply crate. All of it has contributed to bringing thousands of people one step closer to safety. As camp is established for another cold night, you stand beside your truck and look back toward the mountains now fading into darkness. Somewhere beyond those distant ridges lie Yudam-ni, Hagaru-ri, frozen foxholes, aid stations, workshops, and lonely sentry posts, places that only days earlier had defined everyday life. Now they belong to memory. The road ahead grows shorter with each passing mile. Hungnam is no longer an idea on a map, it is becoming a destination. And as another quiet evening settles across the convoy, one gentle thought rises above the steady sound of cooling engines. Perhaps the strongest bridges are not only built from steel, but from the patience, skill, and trust that allow thousands of ordinary people to cross them together. The smell of salt reaches you before the sea comes into view. For weeks, your world has been shaped by frozen valleys, steep mountain roads, and endless ridgelines. Every day has begun with snow beneath your boots and ended beneath a sky filled with brilliant winter stars. Now, as the convoy rounds another bend, the landscape begins to change. The mountains slowly give way to wider roads. The air remains cold, but it carries a different scent. Ahead lies Hungnam. The port has become one of the busiest places in Korea. Trucks, jeeps, ambulances, bulldozers, and supply vehicles move steadily toward the waterfront, where rows of cargo ships and naval vessels wait patiently in the harbour. Cranes swing slowly above the docks, lifting crates from trucks into waiting ships. Forklifts move carefully across wooden piers darkened by frost and seawater. Nothing here feels hurried. Everything feels organised. That organisation is no accident. During the withdrawal from the Chosin Reservoir, thousands of Marines, soldiers, sailors, and support personnel worked together to carry out one of the most disciplined evacuations in modern military history. Every vehicle arriving at Hungnam follows a carefully planned sequence. Some are unloaded immediately, others are directed toward maintenance areas for final inspections. Damaged equipment that cannot be transported is documented carefully before commanders decide its fate. Even at the end of a campaign, paperwork continues. A clerk standing beside the dock checks another convoy against a thick stack of manifests. Vehicle numbers, cargo lists, personnel counts. Nothing is left to memory. You guide your truck into its assigned position and finally switch off the engine. For the first time in many days, silence fills the cab. The vibration that has lived beneath your hands throughout the journey disappears. You sit still for a moment. It is remarkable how strange stillness can feel after so many miles of careful driving. Outside, longshore crews begin unloading supplies, boxes of ammunition, medical equipment, radio sets, fuel drums. Everything is carried with the same quiet efficiency that has defined the campaign from beginning to end. Nearby, Navy sailors prepare cargo nets hanging from massive cranes. Heavy trucks are guided toward loading ramps leading into transport ships. Drivers inch forward with extraordinary precision, following hand signals from sailors standing on the steel decks. Every movement matters. Ships must remain balanced. Cargo must be secured. The sea can be just as unforgiving as the mountains. Not far away, another scene quietly unfolds. Hundreds of Korean civilians gather near the docks, carrying blankets, small bundles of clothing, cooking pots, family photographs, and whatever possessions they were able to save during months of war. Many families had followed the withdrawing United Nations forces south, hoping to escape the advancing front. Among them are elderly couples, parents carrying sleeping children, teenagers pushing handcarts through the snow. Their faces reveal exhaustion, uncertainty, and hope all at once. In December 1950, alongside the military evacuation, thousands of Korean civilians were also transported from Hungnam by sea. It became one of the largest humanitarian evacuations of the war, saving countless lives as ships carried families away from the fighting. Watching them board the ships, you realized that the road from Chosin carried far more than soldiers. It carried entire futures. The harbour remains active from morning until long after sunset. Powerful floodlights illuminate the docks as darkness falls. The soundscape has changed completely. Instead of engines echoing through mountain valleys, you hear ship horns calling across the water, Chains clatter against steel decks, winches hum steadily, seagulls circle overhead, their cries drifting across the harbour. The sea itself seems strangely calm. After weeks spent listening to frozen wind moving through mountain passes, the gentle movement of waves against the dock feels almost unfamiliar. You walk slowly toward the edge of the pier. The water reflects hundreds of lights from anchored ships. Some vessels prepare to depart before dawn. Others continue receiving cargo through the night. Behind you, mechanics perform one final inspection on vehicles scheduled for transport. Even here, their work continues. A leaking hose is replaced. A loose battery cable is tightened. A damaged tire is changed before loading. Their responsibility does not end until the last vehicle has been secured aboard ship. Nearby, corpsmen help several exhausted Marines onto a transport vessel. Many suffer from frostbite, fatigue, or illness brought on by weeks of exposure to the cold. Blankets are wrapped tightly around their shoulders. Hot coffee waits inside the ship. For the first time in many days, some of them will sleep without hearing the wind sweeping across mountain ridges. As midnight approaches, loading continues beneath bright electric lights. Supply officers check the final cargo lists. Engineers inspect loading ramps. Military police guide vehicles into neat lines. No one appears rushed. Months of discipline have led to this moment. You think back over everything the campaign has demanded. The lonely sentries watching frozen valleys. The truck drivers guiding convoys through icy mountain roads. The mechanics working before sunrise to keep engines alive. The corpsmen caring for frostbitten hands beneath canvas tents. The engineers rebuilding roads and bridges under impossible conditions. The clerks recording every crate and every name. The cooks who somehow found a way to keep coffee hot. Each task seemed ordinary when viewed alone. Together, they became extraordinary. History would later remember the Chosin Reservoir as one of the most remarkable fighting withdrawals ever conducted. Military historians would study its leadership, its logistics, and the resilience of the 1st Marine Division and the attached United Nations forces under immense pressure. But standing here on the docks at Hungnam, those achievements feel deeply personal rather than abstract. You remember faces, voices, the smell of diesel fuel on frozen mornings, the warmth of a metal cup filled with coffee, the quiet nod exchanged between two sentries changing watch beneath the stars, the patient mechanic tightening one final bolt before dawn, the corpsman reassuring an injured Marine with only a few calm words. History is often written through dates and decisions. Life is remembered through moments. As the first transport ship slowly leaves the harbour, its horn echoes across the cold water. The sound carries far into the night. Behind the vessel, gentle waves spread across the dark sea before disappearing into silence. The mountains remain far behind now. Snow still covers their peaks. Winter still holds them tightly. Yet those who endured them have carried something away that cannot be measured in maps or casualty reports. They carried proof that endurance is rarely built upon grand gestures. More often, it is built through countless ordinary acts performed faithfully day after day, even when no one believes they will ever be remembered. Perhaps that is the quiet legacy of the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. Not simply that thousands survived one of the harshest campaigns of the Korean War, but that they did so together. Drivers trusted mechanics. Mechanics trusted engineers. Engineers trusted convoy commanders. Corpsmen trusted supply clerks. Sentries trusted the Marine beside them. An entire army endured because ordinary people refused to stop doing ordinary work with extraordinary care. As the final lights of Hungnam shimmer across the winter sea and another ship disappears slowly into the darkness, one last peaceful thought remains. Long after the engines have fallen silent, long after the snow has melted from the mountains, and long after the names of individual soldiers have faded from memory, the quiet strength of those who kept one another alive still echoes through history, reminding us that even in the coldest seasons of war, humanity can remain warm.